Start recording, and then I'm going to share my screen. And welcome everybody to today's Leadership Weekly Roundtable. What we're going to be talking about today is something that is should be familiar to you, because you know you've been exposed to weekly roundtables before. However, today what I want to do is I just want to look and focus and deep dive into this phrase that I use quite a lot. And it's really important for us all in the world of change and transformation as practitioners and modern leaders to genuinely reflect upon this and to understand how important it is in who we are and also in the design and delivery of what we do. And that one small thing that we must believe, of course, is that small doesn't mean slow. And I'm sure that we have all got stories when we have been in meetings with people and they've said, oh, you know what, we need to slow things down here. We need to go smaller. So the words small and slow tend to become synonymous with each other. And actually that is something that we need to unlearn. We need to unlearn the connection between small and slow, because they are disassociated when it comes to transformation. And if we want to be agile at scale, what we want to be doing is we want to be focusing on small micro shifts. And that's what today is all about. So a lovely quote, as always, to kick us off from Kevin Michel today is: small shifts in the way that we think, in the energy that we bring, in everything that we do, in our mindset and our behavior and our actions, can always lead to massive alterations of our end results. And I think that there's something really powerful here, because if small becomes consistent, you almost get to a point that failure becomes, it's not even an option. Success becomes a guarantee if there is consistency. And the way that we bring consistency is to make things small. So that's what we're talking about here. I think also there's something else about the idea of small for transformation and change in both our own practice and in the design and delivery of change and transformation for people around us, is this: when we start off, we know that what we're dealing with from a human perspective is we're dealing with deep neural pathways. We're dealing with neural pathways that are already established. People's perception, people's reality, people's habits, people's norms, they are pretty hard and fast. And that's where resistance comes from. Now, a lot of the time, what you notice is that we will think that if we explain it properly, if we train, if we make connections with them, the people around us, they will engage with change. They will potentially for a small amount of time, but then it will wane. And the reason for that is those neural pathways are so deep within their own current norms and reality that they will revert back. So as soon as something changes, they'll go back to those neural pathways, because that's the way our brain is wired. So when we're thinking about bringing small into change and transformation, we're all also thinking about how do we start to shift those neural pathways. And the way to shift a neural pathway is a journey. It's a journey of consistency and repeatability. And that's the secret of successful transformation, is to get the neural pathways of the humans around us to start to change, creating new ones and weakening the established ones. That's what this is really all about. And I think there's something else that we ought to be aware of as well, is when we are designing and delivering change and transformation, when we're bringing agile into a culture or a community, we have to recognize, we have to keep reminding ourselves that there are two sides to the coin. There are two halves of us. There is the unconscious half and there is the conscious half. They're almost 50-50. And the unconscious practice, of course, is the habit, And that's really where those deep neural pathways come into play. And then we have the conscious practice, which is our decision making. And what is really interesting is 95% of our decisions are habitual, are unconscious. So we can look at this slide in front of us and go, right, okay, so I'm dealing with half and half. But if you're thinking about new decision making, if you're thinking about trying to support different decisions being made, which is essentially what we need right at the very beginning of change and transformation, we're dealing with 95% of a person's neural pathways that we need to be shifting. So it's not just about the business case. It's not just about how strong our transformation is in terms of proof. Neither is it how motivational it is in terms of vision. We have to deal with the humans too. And we have to deal with them from that neural pathway perspective. So it's a really, really important element. And what I'm talking about, of course, is I'm talking about mindset. I'm talking about the way we think, and I'm talking about our reality. Today, what I want to do is I just want to introduce you to the framework on a page. Not necessarily spend too much dwell time on it, but this essentially is the simplified version of the Dilyn Way framework, which is a human and social systems framework for transformation. And what I want to do today to really talk about small is beautiful, to talk about how we can become agile at scale, is in the top right hand side, is that approach. The way that we do it is all through what we call the power of one. And if you look at the top right hand side of today, of the slide that I've got on in front of you now, that journey of individual, which is me, as well as a few, is what I want to really, really talk about, and particularly one of them. So we're just going to go into one of them today because there's depth behind them, and we'll bring them all individually into weekly moments over the next few weeks. So the top right hand side of the slide that you've just seen, there is the very top right was talking about individuals and small groups. This is when we're working on ourselves, when we're coaching or mentoring an individual, or when we might be designing a very deep intervention for a small group of people. And that could be a very small team that have to work very deeply together on a particular element of transformation and change. So this is where these two elements are really, really important. So the first one is what we call a habit cycle. Not going to go into that today. I'm going to bring that into one of the weekly moments in future weeks. But what I want to do is I want to focus in on the right hand side. Now, before I focus in on the right hand side, what I also want to do is I also want to give you a visual connection. If you remember the earlier slide that I showed you, which was the 45% on the left unconscious practice and the 55% on the right side, which was conscious practice, that visually overlays on what you've got here. So the habit cycle is what we use to shift our own unconscious practice individually, or when we're coaching or mentoring another person, or when we're working with a group of people, a small group of people that have to work deeply on an element of change and transformation together. We want to work with them in that element. And the 55%, which is conscious practice, is what we work on with the power up. And the power up is fantastic because it's very closely aligned to an element of modern leadership competency, which you may have heard of, which is called flow practice. And flow practice, when we get into flow, time and space drop away. We're able to increase our focus to the point where we can work at speeds that for some people would be unimaginable in normal daily life. So the ability to start working in the space of powering up our day gives us the beginning foundation of something that we can start working on, which is flow practice. And flow practice is something really important for leaders like yourselves and practitioners in change and transformation, because come on, how much do we need to do? How much is the system asking of us? There's always this sense of more. There's always this sense of expansion in terms of requirements when it comes to change and transformation. And the key thing is we can do more with less. And one of the ways that we can do more with less is in flow practice. So let's dig into this power up a little bit more. I'll come back to that slide in a moment. The power up is really important because the power up and the habit cycle are elements that we should ensure that we, as leaders of change, our team as practitioners of change, our leaders as the drivers and the supporters, the sponsors, and actually, you know, the key role models of change, and the wider collective need to be involved in. The thing that I can't stress enough is this: when you're in the world of change and transformation, and it doesn't matter whether it's learning and development, whether it's change practice, projects and programs, it's irrelevant. But so often we see ourselves as providers of expertise and of domain. And we focus our design and we focus all of our efforts on the collective, so the people, the end users. That's wrong. What we ought to be doing is understanding ourselves as part of that system, even if we're an external consultant, even if we're external to the organization, the culture. We should see ourselves as part of the whole system and therefore participate in it. So one provocation, one thought I want to give to you now is, if there is a program, a project or a program that you're working on at the moment, are you thinking of yourself as a participant in that? Or are you thinking of yourself as a provider of expertise to deliver that? And what I'd say to you is, try and make it the former as a participant. Because if you make yourself a participant in change and transformation, it's one of those key elements. So everything I'm talking about here is so incredibly important in terms of your own profile, your own ability to succeed in change and transformation. So this is all specific to you, the individual, the micro habits, the individual, the micro actions, and it's the micro actions that we want to work on today. So micro actions in our conscious practice are what we call power ups, and power ups, which are 1% marginal gains, are part of a methodology and approach that is not new. It's a methodology and approach that has been used in the world of sport and peak performance for decades. But it's only now starting to be used with value and rigor within the corporate environment, and more specifically within the transformation agendas. So the 1% marginal gain is incredibly important because it gives us one key element that's very, very, very highly connected to success. It allows us to bring transformation into business as usual. It allows us to bring the essence of the future into what we're doing in the moment of now. And that's how we connect humans. Change and transformation, it's a project and a program. Oftentimes it ends up being an innovation lab, or it's elitist, and we've got a group of people that are sitting in somewhere squirreling away and designing, and then it all comes out and it gets delivered. And if it works, there is this wonderful intention that we will scale it across the organization. We know that that doesn't work. We know that there are methodologies like Kotter, Accelerate, that have been used in the past, but we know that they challenge the human system changing. It works for structure, it works for budget, it works for technology, it works for process redesign. It does not work in a lasting way from a human perspective. But if we add marginal gain to our design, the 1% power up, we know it does work. We know it works because it has compound interest. It allows us to really add compound interest to change. If you increase your daily practice by 1% today and tomorrow and the day after, and in a week you've got 5% uplift. In a month you've got up to 30%. In a year you've got up to 300% uplift in terms of productivity, in terms of experience, in terms of energy, in terms of potential innovation and experimentation. And these are key to agile at speed. So when we talk about a power up, when we're talking about adding increase to our day by 1%, or the day of the team, the day of the leader, the day of the collective, we've got 4 types. I'm so sorry, I've got the automated transitioning on. I'm not going to turn it off because I don't want to upset the flow of the session. So we have 4 types of power up. The first type of power up is what we call the effective power up, and this focuses in on productivity. The second type of power up we have is what we call experience, and this focuses in on the emotional behavioral side, the human connective piece of transformation. The third power up is what we call energy, and this is where the focus comes in when it comes to transformation. Prioritization on what is really important as opposed to urgent, etc. So if you remember the Eisenhower matrix. And the final one, the experimental power up, is really important because it's where we allow space in our day, in the day of the team, in the day of the leader, in the day of the collective, to scratch that itch, to play with curiosity that doesn't have an end goal, to play with a curiosity that doesn't have a target, a number, an objective, a key performance target. So experimental power up is where it's open to play, and we just want to see where something goes, and it's really important. So what we're trying to do, what we want to do, is we want to start each day individually ourselves, encouraging it in the leaders around us and in the teams that we are bringing on the transformation journey with us, is we want to encourage them to choose with meaning a power up every single day and add increase to that day by 1%. And it can be either productivity, it can be the human connection, it can be focus and attention, or it can be innovation and experimentation. It doesn't matter which one it is, because we need the mix of 4 of them, but it's about adding increase in our day by 1%. And just thinking about that, if you were to start to deliver this to your team, start to work with your team on the 1% marginal gain, start to work on this in a committed way yourself, then I can't tell you the positive that you get out of it. These small changes can have incredible shifts at scale when you start to add them together in terms of compound interest. The final thing that I'll say to you on the power up is this: there is a narrow and a wide focus. So what you might be thinking about is, how do I choose which power up? Either if it's myself or with a team, how do I choose it, Mel? Well, think about what you've got on your plate. Think about what's going to unfold in the day ahead of you, the week ahead of you. What are the priorities? Focus in on those priorities. What does what's the vision and the ambition? And what you can do is you can then, gosh, that's starting to get quite frustrating, isn't it? What you can do is you can narrow in. So if you want to focus in on something specific, narrow it in. And you can narrow it in on a project, you can narrow it in on a meeting, you can narrow it in on a conversation. Just narrow it in on something. Or what you can do is you can have a wide focus. And I do this often because I really feel that this replenishes me. So often my power-ups on a daily basis, I've got a narrow focus because they're specific to product, they're specific to a customer, a client. So everything is driven by that one priority. But then what I do now and again is I give myself a couple of weeks of wide focus on my power-ups, and every single power-up every single day is just about me, and it gives me a wide focus. So the power-up is arguably for me one of the most important small micro shifts that we should be committing to ourselves as modern leaders and transformational role models, as well as encouraging it and designing this into our change and transformation. And it doesn't matter whether it is a highly technical, delivery project we're talking about, it's still valuable. But key is this: the power up is where we can all participate. We can all participate in change, so we become part of the entire system. We are the project managers, we are the domain experts, but also the leaders around us, also our teams and the end users. If everybody is participating in power-ups, in those 1% marginal gains, and we've got transparency around them, we've got human connection. If we've got human connection, we've got community. If we've got community, we've got motivation, and we've got purpose, and we've got reason to commit. And if we've got all of that, then we've got transformation accelerated, and we've got agile at scale. And that's a really, really important thing. So it might sound as if I'm talking about something incredibly small, but small has got incredible power. And that's the power up. And that's something that we do in our conscious practice on a daily basis. That conscious practice on a daily basis also translates to the system. And some of you might remember in an earlier weekly moment, in an earlier Leadership Roundtable, where we talked about how do you design projects, programs, learning and development, change and transformation. How do you design it for the collective? So we've talked about conscious shifts for individuals, ourselves, and small teams, but how do we do it at scale when it's a full-blown transformation project or a learning and development program for many people? And this is where we use the Maya principle. And the Maya principle is incredibly important. I'm not going to go into it in any detail today because we talked about it in an earlier weekly moment, and it will roll round in the next few months as well. But essentially, what we've got in Maya is the ability to design micro shifts towards an individual moonshot, towards the future. And the way that we do it is in a 3-step process. So Maya means most acceptable yet achievable. Most acceptable yet achievable. And what we find is when transformation or change is in challenge, when transformation and change is stuck, when people are resisting, it's because we've gone too small or we've gone too big. We've given them too much. So sometimes we might be too small that we've depleted motivation. Sometimes we've gone too big that we're outside of the capability zone, we're outside of the zone of reality. So what we want to be doing is we want to be making sure that we hit that sweet spot when we're designing and delivering and deploying our change steps, our change processes in transformation or learning and development. So the 3 things that we need to do to find that sweet spot is, number 1, get the zone of familiarity clear. We need to understand what people are doing habitually, what people's norms are in the way that they're speaking, in what they're doing. And we don't ask people for that, because when we ask people for that, the likelihood is that they'll give us what they think they're doing, not what they're truly doing. So we really want to be honing in on the art of observation. The second thing we want to do is we want to make sure that we have got clarity of the zone of possibility. What is possible? And what is possible is not designed from today. What is possible is always designed from the future and in the future. It is easier for us to be accurate designing what's possible in 3 years than it is for us to design with accuracy what's possible in 12 months. Because what we think is possible in 12 months is too closely linked to reality today. When we push ourselves to design 3 years from now, we're so far removed from the reality of today, the likelihood of our ability to design something that is possible increases. And that's fact. And there's research and statistics behind us. So when we're thinking about where we're going, when we're designing our moonshot, our visions, our strategies, we do not want to be designing from today into 12 months. We want to head straight for 3 years from now and then reverse engineer back to 12 months, back to quarter, back to month, back to week, back to now. And that's how we do it. So we create forward and we measure backwards. It's so incredibly important for us to do that. I've been there. I've been in that moment where it's so tantalizing to design based on where you are now, but it means that we're not pushing to an audacious goal. We're not pushing through to the art of the possible. design for 3 years, reverse engineer back. And once we're able to do the zone of familiarity, get clarity on that, and we've got that zone of possibility, what we've got is we've got a start point and we've got a moonshot, the zone of familiarity. And all we need to do between now and then is to start to create tiny little micro shifts. And that's what delivering Maya is all about. And those tiny little micro shifts, each and every one of them is designed to the zone of possibility, and then it is critically analyzed to the zone of familiarity. So we design it for possible and we critically analyze it to the zone of familiarity. And if you do that, what you're doing is you're moving everybody towards the moonshot. It's so incredibly important. If we're designing from the zone of familiarity, if we're designing from now, what we're doing is we're making our current reality better, faster, and smarter. And that's okay if you want continuous improvement, but we're talking about transformation. And if you want to transform, what we want to do is we want to create those micro shifts based on that zone of zone of possibility. Design there, create there, critically analyze based on the zone of familiarity, and get your Maya sorted. And that's what gives us that human arc of transformation. The human arc of transformation is not the same as a project or program. If you think about a project or program of change or transformation, what you'll see is you'll see a start point, an end point, and a straight line from A to B. And there's always an end goal. When you're talking about human transformation, there is a curve of human transformation. It's not a line, it's a J curve. And it's because we've got tiny micro shifts. The tiny micro shifts should in and of themselves as individual shifts almost feel like nothing. But you know they're shifts. And this is where the 1% marginal gain comes into the collective design of our change and transformation. Because when you retrospective, when you look back and you measure multiple micro shifts, you can see the humans changing the way they think and behave. And what you're not doing is you're not just applying knowledge, narrative, business cases, and skills. What you're actually doing is you're creating new neural pathways. That's what's super important. So there's so much richness to the idea of creating small when it comes to ourselves in terms of 1% power-ups, and when it comes to designing for a system or a collective in terms of micro shifts and using the principle of Maya. So my key message today for everybody is this: small doesn't need to be slow. Small doesn't mean that we're just going to make what we've got better. If we use 1% marginal gain power-ups in who we are, if we design based on the rules and the laws of Maya, it means that we are moving towards our moonshot. And that's transformation. And that's audacious. And that's courageous. And that's amazing. So I've got 2 banana skins for us today. The first banana skin is don't create from the past. I've mentioned it before to you all, but it's so important for us to keep us reminding ourselves, to keep ourselves in check. This decision I'm making, this design that I'm generating, this conversation that we're having at the moment, is this focused on changing what we've got now based on now, or is this focused on the future and how we get to the future? It's so incredibly important. So, creating from the past is a banana skin that is very, very easy for us to slip on. So please don't try not to slip on it. And the second thing is focusing only on shifts in your end users, which is what I mentioned earlier on. As practitioners, we ought to see ourselves as participants in change and transformation. We shouldn't see ourselves as experts of domain that are advising, guiding, designing, or deploying. We should see ourselves as an equal participant. And wherever we can ourselves participate in the techniques of transformation, we should, because that brings us into the phase of role modeling, and it also adds human connection. It's so important to see ourselves as a participant in the system as opposed to just seeing ourselves as a domain of expertise. That's a banana skin I see a lot of transformation project leads fall into. So that brings us to the end of today in terms of my little lexicon. What I do want to do though is I want to share with everybody some exciting news that we have got our new launch. So we've got our new season practitioner training that launches, and the first date is the 20th of June. So we are going to be doing a lot of communication around that new launch of our season. So if you yourself or if any of your teams are interested in certifying in the idea of agile at scale and humanizing transformation, then please just get in touch. And what you can see in the chat is that I have put, as always, our strategy session link there, so you can organize a strategy session with myself. What that strategy session does is it allows you and I, just the two of us, to talk about where you are now, where you want to be in 12 months time, where your transformation is, where that transformation should be in 3 years, so that you can then reverse engineer back. And that's really important. And then knowing the answers to those questions, exploring those questions, we can see and start to look at the process to help you get there. And I guess now it brings me either to open discussion and seeing what thoughts have come out of today for you all, and just ask you, how are you moving? How's the team moving? How is the system and the collective moving towards your purpose and your core objective? Because if we're all moving with marginal gain, 1% gains, using Maya, using micro shifts, and we are moving together as a collective, then the likelihood of accelerated success is going to be real, because we're humanizing it, right? We're making ourselves participants, we're making ourselves part of it, and not creating a social separation between the people affected by change and transformation and us as the domain of expertise. And it's really, it's a really important element, because traditionally we are taught to separate ourselves. Traditionally, we're taught to develop our own profile and persona as the experts, because that's what will give people trust. There's absolute value in being clear in our own profile in terms of credibility and reputation, because yes, there is respect, but I wouldn't necessarily say trust. Trust is when people can see in who you are the essence of the future. And that's where us being participants within change and transformation, and not just the domain experts guiding or delivering it, is an incredibly important bit. So I'm going to stop sharing, I'm going to bring it back into the room, and I'm just going to ask, is there any little nugget of today that you may have heard as something familiar, and yet think to yourself, gosh, that's something new for me, I hadn't thought about it necessarily in that way, or indeed something completely new that you may have heard today?
So there was something for me, Mel, and you know that I am familiar with a lot of what you were speaking about, but you know how you just have that wee light bulb moment? And today for me, the wee light bulb moment was when you were talking about Maya, and that continuous improvement is in the zone of familiarity, but transformation is in that zone of possibility. Now, it just connected all of a sudden. I'm like, oh, right, now I get it. And I think for me, that's been a real wee light bulb moment, which is great, because I probably did know it, I just hadn't put the pieces together. So yeah, that was really, really useful. So thank you.
No worries, and thanks for that. And you're absolutely right. It's a really good wager for you to kind of like just think about what you're doing. Am I designing in the zone of familiarity, or am I designing in the zone of possibility? As a belief in the transformation programs that I've been involved in, and I've been involved in some incredibly complex systemic transformations in the past, what I will say to you is this: I don't believe in continuous improvement. I believe that we can, if we get it right, be continuously transforming. I absolutely do, if we get it right. because continuous improvement is really the sort of things that we want to automate. We want to give that stuff to the machine. But the transformation, the creativity, the human element, the art of the possible, you know, the evolution of humanity, that's continuous transformation. And that's what we should be doing as humans. And the rest of it, give it to an automated machine. We can do that now. That's brilliant. Thanks, Lorraine. Any other thoughts or ideas or questions?
Hi, Mel.
Hey, Anna.
Yeah. I mean, a bit linked to what you were just saying at the end about sort of, you know, how teams are moving and things like that. And I just wanted to say, I spoke to you a few weeks ago about interviews.
Yeah.
You know, I had a very big amount of people that I was interviewing for sort of roles within my team. And thank you for your support on that, because, you know, I used some of your questions to help with that. And just to say that I've now got the 2 people that are going to be starting in my team soon. So really looking forward to sort of helping them as part of our big digital transformation project. And for me, it's sort of the first time being a people manager. So when you're talking about these things, I'm thinking of it from a people manager point of view, as well as a project point of view, and sort of trying to think about how I can sort of pass things on to my new team and to help them do the same kind of things.
Oh, that's fantastic. So Anna, you've said something so incredibly important there, and I love what you've said, to have recognized that, because really, you know, if you remember the slide earlier on that I had, which was self, team, leaders and collective, they are the 4 quadrants of transformation, and each one of those quadrants should be actively participating in the techniques of humanizing transformation. So what you've just said there is fantastic. It's you, yourself, how all of this is applied to you, because that gives you role model status, how all of this applies to your team so that they too are role models, but equally what it means is that they are evolving at the same time as they are delivering transformation to the system. What you find a lot when you're managing teams in change and transformation is this: they become so embroiled in the end goal of the project or the program that they lose their own personal growth, their own growth and development, because all of their energy is focused on what they're delivering. And then they come out of it and go, okay, let's breathe. Where are we? Right. And, you know, all of a sudden the system's moved on, but we haven't. It doesn't need to be like that. So I think, you know, what a beautiful place and time for you to be in, to recognize, you know, especially, you know, in these weekly moments, what we talk about is how you're able to infuse personal growth and development, that momentum of change and evolution in your team, as well as yourself, as well as in the successful delivery of your digital transformation. Love it. I love it. That is brilliant. That's made my day. What a great comment. Thank you. Excellent. Joanna, anything for you today? I know that you've got to head off very soon.
No, I was just going to say thank you. And actually, I remember what Lorraine said. Do you know what? I mean, I went through this with you quite a few months ago, and it really didn't make sense to me. And it was like, it's a muddle. And I agree with what Lorraine said. It's suddenly I've gone, right, no, I get it. And I sat here and I was thinking, well, yeah, you do that in your personal life. You look and you go, I want to be here. How am I going to get there? I'm going to get there by, and I work my way back. And it's like, duh, why haven't you done that in this scenario? So it's, yeah. And I think because I'm not in work at the moment, I've got this headspace, and this headspace is just allowing all of this to bubble away. It's like a little coffee percolator go.
I love it. That is amazing. Oh, thanks for that. I really appreciate that. And also remember that you are on holiday, so thank you for joining today's moment, given you're on a holiday. And you know,
it's actually fine. I've got this.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. But Joanna, what you've mentioned there is you've mentioned something that taps into one of the emerging areas of leadership. So if you look at the science and research around modern leadership, that's just starting to emerge. A lot of the work that is being done at the moment around modern leadership is in the world of energetics and energy management. And one of the laws of energy management when you're working with an individual leader in a mentoring and coaching capacity is that once you help them to clarify their future self, what you then do is you help them to operate as their future self within the reality of today. So it, and it's quite a nuance. Instead of going, that's where I want to go, and I'm going to plan how I'm going to get there. In energy management, in modern leadership, what the principles say is, I understand and clarify that future self, and then believe and just operate as that future self today, and you accelerate that. And that's a brilliant way to be working with executive leaders, to get them to really explore their future self, and then to start using micro shifts to bring that into the reality of today. So, again, that's the application of the same principle, Maya, to modern. I mean, the energy people won't tell you that probably, but it's exactly the same. You design on the zone of possibility, and you just critically analyze against the zone of familiarity. So yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you for that. Excellent. Well, there we go. So another weekly moment. I'm really looking forward to next week. So we will be back on stage, same time, same place next week, talking about another tiny little element of how we can humanize change and transformation, and also, as you've probably already gathered, how we ourselves can be the role models and the instigators of that in terms of, our own practice. So I hope that everybody has a fantastic day and a brilliant Queen's Jubilee ahead. And please let it not rain on Sunday, because we are having a tea party outside, and I don't want to put the marquee up. So I hope everybody enjoys the long weekend and has a restful time. Enjoy the rest of your holiday, Joanna. Look after your back, Lorraine. And it's fantastic to hear that you've got 2 members of that team coming to join you, Anna. That means that you are absolutely ready to go. That's fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Mo, great for you to join us as well. I know we can't see you. I know you've got internet problems, but hopefully you've been able to hear us through today's session as well. And I really appreciate you joining. Take care, everybody, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you, Mel. Bye.
Bye.